Welcome to the L&D Explorers podcast from GoSkills. On today's episode, we're talking with Dr. Robin Sargent, the founder of IDLE Courses and an expert in instructional design. Our topic today is social learning. So we'll discuss the four elements of social learning, how it takes place within organizations, and how L&D teams can integrate it into formal training. We'll also discuss how culture impacts social learning and the importance of learning artifacts to guide training. I'm Dan Gorgone, course producer for GoSkills. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, this is Dan Gorgone. I'm the course producer at GoSkills. Welcome back to the L&D Explorers podcast. And with us today, we've got Dr. Robin Sargent, who is the founder of IDLE Courses and the author of The Do It Messy Approach, a step-by-step guide for instructional designers and online learning developers. That's a mouthful, Robin.
Yeah, well, you got to put those SEO terms in your book title. It can't just be the do it messy approach. It'll be like, what the heck is that all about? The do it messy approach, the story of my life. No, it's not.
I hear you. Well, thanks for joining us. So the topic that we're going to be talking about today is social learning. And so I'm wondering that right off the bat, if you can give us an idea of what exactly that means, because I imagine some people hear social and learning and they start to wonder, does that mean we're doing things on social media? Does that mean that we're doing things in groups? I mean, what sort of learning happens in this way? What does it all mean? And why should the L&D people who are watching the podcast pay attention to this topic?
Yeah, well, I think, there's been social learning theory has been around like formally since like the 1960s, and that's where it started. And we really started right with children learning from adult behaviors. The root of it is that we're social animals and we learn through imitation, and we learn through imitation at a very young age. And I think at this point, social learning has expanded to be part of that informal learning that we do, that we learn on the job. If we're going to relate it back to workplace learning, it's that learning that happens at the water cooler, or by engaging in a round table with your colleagues, or if you learn from a mentor and you're in the sales field, right? And you go out with the high performing salesperson and you watch what they do so that you can then imitate it yourself. And so that's kind of the origins of social learning theory. And it's really just, we're social creatures. We learn from others. It's how we've learned how to do all the things in our history. Just think about, even ancient civilizations and the use of tools and so on and so forth. They weren't writing those things down. They weren't creating movies. They were passing that information along through like apprenticeships and through social learning.
So L&D professionals who are hearing this, who are, hearing about social learning, I know that any of them are going to be interested in any kind of ways that they can train their people. And so I'm sure that, many of us have been consumed with the ideas of trying to come up with programs that include courses and have guest speakers or different kinds of, hands-on training, things like that, as a way of training people, and could be onboarding. It could be, part of transferring them to different skills or different departments, things like that. But social learning, so the way you describe it kind of sounds like it's passive, and also sounds like you said, it's also like an informal sort of thing. It's like something that you watch, you observe, but it also sort of like happens all the time, and it happens all around you. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
I would say that at this point, social learning, like we usually think about it as those informal things, but you can turn it to be a very designed process at this point. As a matter of fact, some of the active ways to incorporate social learning would be, for example, I'm the founder of IDLE Academy as well, which is the first and only virtual vocational school for our industry. It's licensed vocational school. And so in that program, part of social learning is weaved throughout it. And part of the active part is getting feedback on purpose from experts in the field, working professionals. And so that is an active part of learning, but it's social learning because you are getting feedback from other professionals. And there are other designed and very specific and targeted ways to use what we know about social learning. We know that people get inspiration, right? They imitate or they learn by watching others, and you can actually make social learning part of a formal program, and you can do it on purpose.
So what are some ways that we can do that? Let's follow that path, right? So what are some strategies that companies can use to integrate social learning into their programs, and maybe what are, one or two sort of examples where the inspiration can happen for people, where you can decide this is the kind of activity that we want to put in front of people, or this is a situation we want to put them in, and we want to see if the social learning can happen.
Yeah, so I like to think about it as like attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. And that's like that comes out of social learning theory as well. And so if you think about like a category of attention, well, you can use social learning icebreakers as a good example of social learning, getting their attention through stories of their own peers and colleagues, something that captures them and gives the what's in it for them, connects to them emotionally, or even shares what is the benefit for them. You can share that through like it will benefited me, right? Like you can even think about social learning even happens in therapy, right? Like an AA program, right? That is social learning about learning how to overcome addiction, right? And so you get the attention even in those situations by other people sharing their stories or what, how I was in your place, but now I'm here. And so that can inspire people and again, capture attention. If the next one is retention, well, then like, how are they going to retain what they learned? Well, we know that we process information by taking what's internal and making it external. And so that's talking about what we've learned. And so social learning isn't it just about watching other people do what they do, but it's also sharing what you've learned with other people, which actually makes those memory traces or the retention of what you've learned even stronger in your own mind, right? And they say like, the best way to learn a thing, right, is to get to the place where you like learn, do, and teach. And that again goes back to that social learning aspect. The other one is a reproduction. And so that is like the feedback aspect of social learning, where you have them learn, have them do, and then they get feedback from somebody who is more skilled and more advanced in whatever it is that they needed to do in order to get that targeted feedback on what it is that they can enhance. I mean, it's not just workplace learning. That applies to all sorts of things, including sports, right? You even like I have three boys. I almost said four. I have a husband. He's not a boy. I have three boys, and they are all in sports. And so they're not going to get better just because they're playing basketball on the hoop in our driveway. They get better because the coach says, you're holding your arm wrong. You need to put your feet like this. You need to throw straight or whatever that is. And that is that specific targeted feedback that you get. And then the last thing is motivation. And because we're social creatures, a lot of motivation can come just from being in a social learning environment, having people cheer you on, having even the motivation that knowing that other people are watching you. You'll even see it like in universities, right? The universities that have the on-ground classes versus the online classes. The show up rates for on ground classes are higher than those online. And I would say, and I think studies would probably show that the reason why you have more people show up to the in-person is because there is a social pressure for them to show up. Whereas in online, you can hide and like they're not keeping attendance in the same way. Your peers aren't noticing if you're missing from the online class. But if your seat is empty, they're going to notice and they're going to be like, hey, Susie, why didn't you show up to class? Or, oh, I missed you. Or you're a part of our learning team and I needed you to be a part of our group work. And so motivation comes through that. And then just being able to share brings motivation. And also motivation comes from a sense of mastery. And how do you know that you've mastered something unless you have gotten the feedback from your peers? And so, social learning, in a lot of ways, we probably integrate it without necessarily thinking like, I'm integrating social learning theory. We're just thinking, oh, this could make this fun. This could make this, wouldn't it be great if we got other people to share their experiences about making sales or running cold calls or whatever that training is about?
This is great because I want to just run down those four elements again so that people hear this and retain it. Retention, yes, yes. So the four elements of social learning that you mentioned, first one, attention. So that learning process where you actually are observing and you're taking stuff in. Second one is retention, where you actually start to apply it. You do the things, you try it on your own. Third part being reproduction. Well, that's actually another part where you're doing things, but you're getting that qualitative feedback from the experts or a mentor or something like that. Understanding how you can refine your own process and skills and steps. But then the fourth step is motivation, talking more like the social feedback. So hearing that what you're doing is positive, it's making a difference, or even sort of like looping back. It's make a change, try it. Oh, let's try it again. It's kind of looping between steps three and four. I could see where people are they keep refining and refining their skills. Those four steps make a lot of sense to me. It seems like mentoring, apprenticeship, and especially a mentoring program would seem like it would be a perfect fit to make social learning happen for the people in your company.
Yeah. And just think about, how frustrating it is for people to be feeling alone. That's one of the things I hear from my students a lot was that the thing that they valued the most in our program was the community, right? That they knew that they weren't alone on their journey, that they always had like their peers to turn to who were on the same journey that they were on, that they could reach out to their own faculty members, right? That they could show up and they could, even express frustrations because learning's not just academic, it's also emotional because there is emotions tied to what we're learning, especially in the workplace, right? This might be tied to my professional advancement or whether I get a promotion or a raise or things like that. And so social learning not only changes behavior, it can also change attitudes, which is
Mhm.
pretty incredible when you think about a holistic understanding of learning and just how impactful that social aspect can be.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it starts to change the culture. Like
Yeah.
once you start to put something in place with people sort of observing these, steps of social learning naturally, it's because it's something that we are doing naturally, and you're kind of putting, I think, kind of exposing the structure of it, the process of it. The more that people do this and the more that people are expected to do this, the more people welcome that feedback and the interaction. Not only are the people who are trying to learning, but the people who are teaching are learning as well. And so, everyone starts to uh, take in more information, but also I think it starts to reflect on other people and especially new hires that come in. They will see mentoring happen, or they'll see that open communication and open, honest, constructive feedback is a part of the culture, right?
I think that's a great connection because that's one of the things that they find, right? When organizations have a culture of learning and more specifically social learning, it improves the culture because it improves the behaviors and the attitudes. And you also all those studies that show like people are looking for feedback in their roles. They are looking for advancement through mentorship and through training and that a lot of that comes through those social learning aspects.
So anything that L&D professionals are going to implement, they're going to need to measure it. They're going to need to know if it's effective or not. in discussing this, I know it feels like this would be difficult to measure because of the nature of, sometimes it's passive, but it's like also informal, but sometimes it is formal because it's part of our mentoring program and it's maybe we've got apprentices. Uh, how do you measure something like this to know that the things that you're doing actively are effective, but also that the culture is reflecting what you want to reflect there?
I think it has to go back to like this might be more of like a moderating variable or something like that. It still has to be instructionally sound. And what I mean by that, it has to be in an instructional alignment. So you've got to know what your outcomes are. And then those have to be tied to the assessments, which is how we measure things. And that has to then be connected to the activities. And all of those things are aligned. And those are the things that we're measuring, right? We're measuring their assessments, which should be connected to the outcomes and the activities. Now, the activities, I think, is where we're starting to put in that social learning. So if the alignment is sound and we know that this is, the problem or the task-centered instruction that they need so that it can transfer on the real world, these other things like social learning enhance those things, just like gamification. You don't learn more effectively just because you add points and badges and leaderboards to, a learning intervention. Instead, the learning itself, the content is king or queen. It has to be instructionally aligned. But once you know that it works and that is sound and those measurements are in place, then you add gamification or you add social learning to target the behaviors that you want that enhance learning effectiveness. So, for instance, I know in my program and in our school, I want those students to create professional level assets for their portfolio. And so I know that the ways that I can measure that, right, is like by a rubric and things like that. But who's going to be the one that determines whether they've met that rubric? Well, then it becomes a little more subjective and we bring in that social learning aspect. I mean, we are getting to the place where maybe you could have a robot do it or something like that. But there is
Hmm.
something really special about having the eyes of an actual professional in the field. There are just things that you're not going to be able to teach people that a professional can catch when they actually see it in the work, right? You couldn't like list all of the don'ts in our industry. Instead, you have to catch them. So that's how I see social learning, not as something necessarily that gets measured, but something that enhances what it is that you are measuring to improve the metrics and those outcomes.
Gotcha. So if people have been listening and they've been paying attention, it's not just let's throw a bunch of people in a room together and see what they learn from each other. It's let's take an instructionally sound approach and consider what outcomes we want, how we can assess them, and let's start to attach activities to it so that we can get the outcomes that we want so that people know what to share and know what they should be, the questions that they should be asking, and the feedback that they should be trying to seek there.
Social learning at this point, and the way that we talk about it, especially in workplace training, is it has to revolve around some type of learning artifact of some sort, right? There's got to be something at the center, because just like you gave the example, it's not enough. I mean, yeah, you could learn something by sitting in a room with people. I mean, usually I'm learning some new dirty jokes, but if we're going to call it social learning and we're going to get specific and targeted about it, there's got to be something that we're all looking at and talking about and sharing. So there's got to be some kind of central learning artifact, whatever that is and whatever that looks like for the program.
So would a learning artifact be something like a business goal that our dear leader shares with us and said we want to improve XYZ by 10% this quarter. And so, and to get that outcome, we want to produce more, or we want to improve the quality of this, or things like that. Like, is that the artifact we're looking for, or is it something based on external forces like customers or clients, things like that?
Well, I think to go with your example of sales, right? So if sales
Hmm.
is the business goal or the business challenge for most people, if it's the challenge, then the learning artifact would be some type of materials around how you are going to improve those metrics, right? And so it'd be about lead generation. Okay, well, how are you doing lead generation? Oh, well, we learned in the training or the course or in this, quick reference guide or whatever it is, that we can get more leads by, qualifying our leads in XYZ way. And then now they have something to center their discussion around and share best practices and things like that. So that's really what I mean by learning artifact.
Well, let me kind of wrap up our discussion here and get you thinking. You touched on it a little bit, like maybe robots will be able to give you feedback about some of the work you do. My question is about the future of social learning. You've mentioned a bunch of examples and talked about how social learning might take place within organizations or different groups or departments right now. What are some of the things that you foresee as tools that we might be able to use? Like, could it be AI? AI has already been the focus of a couple of our episodes simply because of how powerful and how effective it's been, not to mention controversial. So, what do you think? Is AI one of those things we need to worry about in the future, or what are some of the other things that could potentially impact social learning?
I'm not a person that worries about AI. I freaking love it. But I would say, like my friend, Dr. Nicole Papiano Lugera, she is in the industry. She runs Your Instructional Designer, and their whole focus is on social learning networks, which I think is really interesting and really interesting for when we're talking about the future of social learning and the workplace, because organizations are starting to build more of these social learning networks where it is exactly what we've been talking about, where they are building the artifacts that sit at the center, but the activities and the things that they do to enhance the instruction is through social learning networks. So in Nicole's example that she gives is, there's these explorers that are going to go out into Antarctica and do some new research or whatever and find the Yeti. And so, well, how are you going to train these explorers? We like bring them together in the room, and then you train them together and you have them work together and make plans together, right? And so that is like yes, it's learning, like there's some formal instruction included, but it is like centered around those social learning aspects where they are learning from each other and they are creating plans together and they are, expanding what they can do, or even the inspirations that they have. I mean, even in my school, I have my students, they have to give feedback to their own peers in the program. And a lot of them say, well, how am I going to give feedback when I've never been an instructional designer before? And, we, ease them through, what it looks like and that they are qualified, at least as a learner in order to give feedback to their peers. But what we really are targeting here when we say like you need to go give your peers peer feedback is because every asset, every e-learning course, every script that they read, everything that they see produced by other people is them learning from others, right? They can get inspired by others. They can see what maybe they don't want to do or what they do want to do, or they see things that are novel or things that they never thought about. The future of social learning has to be about this change and this shift that I've seen, even in like the fact that an agency solely focuses on social learning networks. And that just makes it more personalized, right? And it gets people excited. People love to interact with other people. That's just how we are made. And so, and we've seen and we love social media. And so I just see more of those social media aspects even making their way into workplace training. Just look at how much we have even taken notes from TikTok to create short form videos for workplace training, and are delivering it in a similar format because we like to see other people, we like it to be authentic, we like it to be human, and we like to be able to connect with other people about shared artifacts. And that could even just be a short form video that you make comments under. I see it happening more, especially as people feel disconnected because of work from home, the isolation they may feel from things all being online. And so it's almost like the pendulum swings, and I
Hmm.
see the pendulum swinging more to people looking for real, authentic human connection, and that's across everything, including how they learn.
I think a lot of what you just said, it felt like a metaphor for what we're trying to do with the podcast here, trying to learn from each other and trying to teach each other. And it's one reason why we called it the L&D Explorers podcast, because we're exploring this space. We really are. Um, so I thank you for that. And thank you so much for sharing your time. I want to give people a chance to connect with you. Where can they find you? Is it social? Is it through Idle Courses, Idle Academy?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, idlecourses.com, and that's also where you'll find access to our vocational school, Idle Academy. We also run an exclusive staffing agency that only hires Idle Academy graduates for large enterprise contracts working on e-learning projects. You can find me all over social. I'm on TikTok. My main platform is LinkedIn, Robin Sargent. You'll be able to find me there. We also have Idle Academy on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Got a Facebook group, Become an Idol. And did I name them all? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook,
Twitter?
LinkedIn.
You're on Twitter
Nah,
too?
I'm not on Twitter. No, X on the X. Uh, and yeah, and I think that's enough. And I would love to connect with you. I am most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to have a conversation with me, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want a free copy, a PDF copy of my book, send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll send it to you right away.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Once again, Dr. Robin Sargent, joining us from Idle Courses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. It's happy to be here.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the L&D Explorers podcast. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe because more episodes are on the way. And no matter what your learning and development goals are, GoSkills can help. Click the link in the description to find out more. And thanks again for watching.